You wanna? Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this evening's webinar, Strengthen Your Gut and Immune Health with Garden of Life. My name is Wendy Haddock Brown, and I'm with Atrium Innovations. And I just wanted to introduce you to your educator this evening. We have Amber Lynn Vital. She is a board certified holistic nutritionist and active member of the National Association of Nutrition Professionals. She's also an Ayurvedic clinical consultant and has produced an online course in traditional Ayurvedic medicine for Wildrose College of Herbal Medicine. Much of her nutrition practice has been in collaboration with functional medicine doctors and other integrated practitioners. In 2014, she became an industry insider working behind the scenes in product education for Garden of Life. She continues to write, lecture, and produce online content on health and wellness topics. In 2020, she and her family of 4 moved from Brooklyn, New York, to a 25-acre farm in Montana, where she now raises sheep, ducks, chickens, and border collies. This is where Amber now puts theory into practice, remediating the soil, improving plant and animal health, as well as that of her family and community, and discovering that herbs that the land offers for the people living in that ecosystem. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Amber.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And hopefully you all know Wendy because she is always the hostess with the mostest, host extraordinaire for all of your webinars. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we are very excited to talk about your immune health, which is very dependent upon your gut health, your gastrointestinal system. And Garden of Life offers options for this that are very much rooted in the soil, rooted in the microbiome, rooted in real food, because that's what our bodies are made to utilize. And it has always been my theory and my practice that whenever possible, consume supplements that represent what you should be eating, and only in extreme cases consume chemical supplements. And that's only when you are not able to eat certain things. And so we'll go over those sorts of situations and what exactly I mean by that. I have to make a little disclosure. I am a paid advisor of Atrium Innovations, and that is my only conflict. And the company Atrium Innovations is not liable for anything I say tonight. So let's have a good time, right? And we are going to talk first about nutrition and immunity. So years ago, it seems like yesterday, but it was years and years and years ago, I had the opportunity to travel out of North America. I went to Mexico, I went to Ecuador, I went to India. And prior to that time, it was one of my stints with vegetarianism. And because I was studying pre-med and because I understood the immune system, I vowed to consume any protein that was put in front of me at any time, no matter what it came from, because I knew the importance, especially in third world countries, of keeping up your protein intake to prevent your susceptibility to infectious disease. And that is pretty much the main differentiator for people who live in areas and countries that are so impoverished that they have no access to adequate protein. This is what makes the difference for their immune health. This is what makes them more susceptible to infectious disease. And for us in North America, what is the reason that we wouldn't have access to adequate protein? Really, even if you are on a very low income, you can make choices that are higher protein with the same budget that you can make choices that are lower protein. It's just that we've been conditioned to make low protein, high carbohydrate, and high chemically transformed fat choices in our diets. And Canada and the US are pretty much hand in hand this way. I mean, I think if we go to Quebec City, we'll see a lot more European influence, Montreal, but for the most part, Canada and the US are exposed to the same fallacies about what we should eat, period, and what we need to eat at certain times of the day. And I was certainly susceptible to this still today. If I saw this on a menu for breakfast, I'd be really hard pressed not to order it because it sounds delicious. But if I eat that carb bomb with good Canadian maple syrup on it, which is my favorite, I will feel off the rest of the day, and I will consume a lot more carbohydrates the rest of the day. It sets the tone. There is not enough protein in that to get my day started properly. Bagels, they feel substantial. They've got, God, there was this great bagel shop in Montreal that I've been to. Some of you may know that. And it, you know, we put cream cheese on it, and it feels substantial, but it really still doesn't have adequate protein. When I'm on the road and I'm in an airport, I am always tempted to have a nice croissant, you know. And oatmeal is supposed to be healthy for everybody. It's heart healthy. You throw some blueberries on it, you've got antioxidants, but it too does not have adequate protein to start your day. Cortisol is what wakes you up in the morning. It is the hormone that gets you up and gets you going. It should be highest at that time of the day. We need to meet that with protein intake. If we meet it with high carb intake, sugars, especially refined and simple carbohydrates, we are going to set up an adrenal response and a stress response for the rest of the day that is extreme. And maybe you've experienced that. You wind up really tanking later in the day, and then you need a run to Tim Hortons, and you need to have a mocha or a latte and a muffin and whatever to kind of get you going. And I have been there. I mean, I've been a nutritionist, you know, since 1996, and yet I have been there in that period of time. And prior to that, when I was in college, I mean, I didn't understand this at all. I fell victim to the same ideas that vegetarian or vegan meant healthy, and didn't really understand the way that the macros play. I knew that protein was necessary to keep blood sugar stable, which it absolutely is, and it helps to suppress the hunger hormone ghrelin when you have protein in your body. But I didn't know exactly how important it is, and then fat plays a role. So if we can balance all of these out, so what's nice, you can actually add protein powder to pancakes. You can actually add it to your oatmeal. You can add it when bread making, and you can increase the protein content of these things if you do a little bit of research on some recipes. So protein is so important to grow us, period. It makes cells, it makes DNA, it replaces every tissue in the body. It's even important in the bones in the form of collagen, which gives bones flexibility. When we are making new humans and feeding new humans, we need even more protein. And then your activity level also dictates what you need. It is based off of your weight to give a calculation, but everybody has different needs. Even all of, I was about to cover the screen, like you can see that, even all of this aside, being active, breastfeeding, or pregnant, a 150-pound female, there is variation just simply by metabolism, by digestive wellness. If a 150-pound female has a damaged gastrointestinal tract because she has inflammation, because of antibiotics, because of a toxic environment, because of stress, because of other medications, because of genetics, because of food allergies, you know, whatever it is, if she's not adequately digesting, absorbing, and assimilating the protein she's eating, it doesn't matter how much she eats, right? And so we have to look at how are we faring with that, and what is our goal? Do we have balanced blood sugar? Do we have balanced energy? If we're trying to gain muscle mass or maintain muscle mass, even if we're older, are we able to do that? Do we have good cognitive functioning? Is our body falling apart? Are we able to repair our cartilage, our tendons? Are we able to recover after a workout or a long hike? You know, these are all things that tell us if that protein we're eating is actually being broken down, absorbed from the gut into the bloodstream, and then put back into use and purpose in the body. So this is just a guideline. And let's just, you know, there's an actual calculation. If anybody wants it, we can throw it into an email or something like that probably, but it's pretty easy to look up, and you can do it by kilogram or by pound. So growing a new human, you need a lot more protein. And a lot more protein in the diet when you're pregnant also helps to allay morning sickness. You have to take it in small bits typically, but it keeps the blood sugar stable, which is often, that and dehydration often contribute to morning sickness. And your caloric needs go up once you've delivered and are breastfeeding, but your protein requirements aren't as strong at that time. But again, it varies by person. And then activity level, it can be even more than that if a person is intensely active and athletic. And that's where you have to start to see if your repair mechanisms are functioning. And so let's talk about men. 180-pound male, just want to maintain, working at a desk job, 100 grams a day. Same caveat, you know, if that is not accomplishing the goals, then maybe there's a digestive problem. If you know that you have digestive inflammation, if you know that when you eat protein, it feels heavy, if you have to take a digestive enzyme after a protein-rich meal, you may need more total protein, but broken up into smaller boluses, smaller, you know, little meals that you might take periodically through the day. I am a huge proponent of real food. However, all of our protein powders are going to be more easily digestible than these whole foods. And so for people who are having a hard time digesting these foods, protein powder is a great place to start. I like people to get back to eating real food. I don't like them to just rely upon powders, but powders are a supplement for a reason. They're easier to break down the rest of the way, easier to absorb, easier to assimilate for that reason. They're convenient. They provide an option for people who aren't, you know, taking the time to maybe cook for themselves or procure the proper foods. So a lot of different options. And we start to see the differences in protein content. The protein in the egg is in the egg white. What does the egg yolk have? Do not get rid of the egg yolk. I hope everyone I'm talking to here, put a hey, throw up a thumb that you know that you need to eat your egg yolks. When people, thank you. So when people get an egg white omelet, I always just look at them very earnestly and say, did you order that because you like it or because you think it's more healthy? And the time is gone when we should think that we need an egg white omelet or we need to buy egg whites in the store and not consume the yolk. I do not care what heart condition or clotting condition or how your arteries are looking. Egg yolk didn't do it. That is not to blame. And that egg yolk it's the perfect food. It has everything your brain needs, everything your cell membranes need. So do not get rid of the yolk in your search for the white and the protein. But 6 grams per egg, so as you may have heard, we raise chickens, and thank God, because my son wants 6 to 8 eggs scrambled every morning. He's 17 and he's working out. And so thank God our chickens are laying eggs right now, because otherwise I'd be broke. Chicken breast, my son also, so he's really studying weightlifting, which is when you really start to consume more protein. He said, Mom, you're a nutritionist. How come you didn't tell me that 3 ounces of chicken breast has the highest protein compared to fish or steak? And why is that? So why is that? Why would 3 ounces of chicken breast at 28 grams be the highest protein content even over a steak? Anyone want to guess? Well, it has to do with fat, right? And it's the same with the egg. So steak has more marbling typically, and so less total protein. And anchovies, of course, have all the essential fatty acids, right? And so they're not as high in protein. That doesn't mean that you should only eat chicken breast. Please diversify the diet. In fact, if all you ate was lean chicken breast, you will be missing the amino acid glycine, and you will be getting an excess of the amino acid methionine, and that's not good. You won't be repairing as well, and you will be overproducing a free radical that is called homocysteine. So don't just stick with one type of protein. 3.5 ounces of salmon, right there about with the anchovies. We like to have a diversity, right? Soy milk, it's a good example. It's not my favorite thing. Excuse me. I need my water. Soybeans got very popular back in the 80s, 70s maybe, because they do have every amino acid. They are complete in the sense that they contain all the amino acids that you need, but nobody realized they didn't contain the right amount of each amino acid. And since the 1970s, the pesticide, the herbicide glyphosate has been developed. And before it was used as an herbicide, it was used as a desiccant to make a crop dry up more quickly so it would go into processing. And so since exactly 1980, our legume crops, so all beans, including soy, and our grain crops, including rice, wheat, barley, all of it, has been sprayed with this desiccant, even before genetically modified seeds were produced, which started as late as 1996. So 16 years of use of glyphosate on certain foods, which the public did not know about. And we were eating in all of our cereals and in our health foods. And glyphosate is also patented as an antibiotic, which leads us kind of to the next concepts here coming up, and that we've been getting an antibiotic in our food supply since 1980. And nobody told us. And so no wonder our guts are messed up. No wonder our immune systems are messed up, since 2/3 of your immune system is in your gut, right? So you have to watch your peanuts, you have to watch soy, and today you want to look for those that are non-GMO project verified and ideally organic and would not be sprayed with glyphosate. You know, soy is now sprayed with glyphosate, not only because it's a legume, but because it's often genetically modified. Peanut butter, because if it's not organic, it will get fungicides and herbicides sprayed on it. Okay, so beware of those things. And then when you are eating animal proteins, know what food your food is eating, right? The neat thing about animals is they have livers and they process a lot of things that never make it into the animal products that we consume. So, you know, the steak itself doesn't contain all the toxins that the cow might have consumed, but it could contain some, and it may have what we do know that is a factory farmed animal, whether it be a chicken and the egg, whether it be farmed fish or factory farmed cattle. Their nutritional profile of their diet is not such that they will have certain very important nutritional constituents in their meat products or their dairy products. So what they eat makes a difference. We cannot sadly know by testing a steak if the cow ate genetically modified corn or soy or rapeseed or cottonseed, but we can test the steak and we can test milk and we can know if the animal was grass-fed or not, because there will be certain constituents in the meat and the milk of grass-fed animals that will not be in factory farmed animals. So that's heartening, and that's kind of the standard that we want to see. Okay, and so options. And Garden of Life started out with everything plant-based, but creating them in a way that was as close as possible to the goodness that you would get from animal products. So again, animals take plants that took light and made matter, and the animals take that matter and they consume it and they transform it into ready bioavailable nutrients that are very easy for us to consume. In fact, I hate to say it, but the animal that is most like us is the pig. And pig is considered in Chinese medicine the most neutral meat and the most rejuvenative because it requires the least transformation to be like us, which is also a reason why there are taboos in certain religions against the pig. Also, the way that they were kept and problems with parasites and so on. What made these plant proteins like an animal protein, but with a clean plant-based supply chain, is the addition of certain nutrients that aid the body in the utilization of protein, and the focus on a diversity of amino acids and the high level of branch chain amino acids like we would find in an animal protein. See, plant proteins are typically much lower in branch chain amino acids than animal proteins. Here, there's a combination of grains, seeds, and legumes to get that as high as possible for the 22 grams that are in it. And then that same protein blend goes into the all-in-one shake. Now, here you have 20 grams of protein, about the same amount of calories, but you have the addition of 44 superfoods in the form of all kinds of fruit and vegetable powders and grass juice powders, spirulina, chlorella, and 7 grams of fiber. Fiber, fiber, fiber. It is so, so, so important. There are many ways to get your fiber, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. The other great thing about this is that per scoop, you get about a half of your day's multivitamin, like a typical multivitamin that you might go to the pharmacy to get. This will give you about half of that. And so if you took 2 scoops, say, because you wanted higher calories and you want to replace a meal, breakfast or lunch, and maybe you did 2 scoops of this, you'd be getting 14 grams of fiber, and you would pretty much not need to take your multivitamin. So I think that's pretty great. Yes, our protein powders have probiotics in them, but they are not, this is 1.5 billion. If you did 2 scoops, 3 billion. But your typical probiotic today that's going to overtake your microbiome and move it in a direction of health is likely to be much more in the realm of 20 to 100 billion. And so 1.5 billion was meant to represent what we would get if we went out and we ate raw food. We ate salads, we ate stuff out of the garden, right? And we interacted with these microorganisms, or we ate fermented plant food. All right, so let's go on to talk a little bit about the microbiome and how that segues into immune health. So what we're facing and why we need multivitamins and minerals, why we need to reinforce the diversity of our microbiome, why we need a lot of support with detoxification, which protein helps with, and immune system support, is because we're no longer living in the same world that we were even 100 years ago. It is incredible how quickly things have changed for the better and for the worse, right? So, you know, we used to have not to worry about the air. Now, there were cities and areas around railroad tracks that you really had to worry about the air in many places even 100 years ago. But you could very quickly have access to a more pristine environment. You know, one of the biggest things that, like I just mentioned, is that we used to live in a world that was free of pesticides, and nobody even thought about what was in their food because food was not that processed. So things weren't taken out and things were not added in. And to have sugar and salt, which absolutely was around more than a century ago, and people were using it, it was not so affordable. It was used very sparingly. You know, I mean, I'm talking to the nation of maple syrup, right? So you know what it is to tap trees, harvest maple syrup, cook it down all day. That's no small thing to get that sugary sweet. If you harvest honey, oh, you have to smoke the bees, you have to get it, you have to scrape it, you have to process it. So it's not like just opening a bag and scooping out sugar the way that we do today. Sugar and salt have become so inexpensive, and they used to be very prized, which I find very interesting. And so today, you know, we're dealing with an incredible amount of high sugar processed foods. We're dealing with pesticides that we didn't even know about, let alone the ones that we do know about. We're dealing with pollution that we can't get away from. We cannot escape it. Even if you're, say, I could be on the road from here to the airport in Montana and be behind a truck that's spewing out pollution, and that's going to affect me badly. And then factory farming, I mean, you all know, but most people still, the highest percentage really don't understand where their food is coming from or what it means. Thankfully, people are starting to understand factory farming. They're starting to understand the difference between that and pastured animals, and the difference between pastured and free range. And, you know, these are all sort of catchphrases, and we need to understand what each of them means. This is caged. Okay, so that's pretty easy. But free range can mean that they're all just out of their cage, but still stuck in the same building, right? Pastured is different. And that now you start to get into an animal that's actually freely moving around and grazing on what it feels like its body's needing based on what's available, right? So first thing I mentioned is that those of us who've been eating since 1980 have been consuming glyphosate, which is an antibiotic, since 1980. Bad news. You know, my mom wouldn't let me have cereals that were junky. No Lucky Charms, no Captain Crunch, right? I had to have grape nuts and rice checks and wheat checks and plain Cheerios and oatmeal. Well-intentioned. However, all of those had glyphosate in them, and Captain Crunch probably didn't, because it was corn. And corn was not genetically modified until 1996. So I would have had a good 16 years of eating Captain Crunch with no glyphosate. You know, so what we don't know can hurt us. I would need to do a study to know if glyphosate or sugar were worse for you. But believe me, I got plenty of sugar along with my glyphosate in a diet where, I mean, you've got kids just demanding sugary cereals because they see it on television, right? They see it in the stores. But there are things that happen before we're even born that we have no control over. How we're born, whether we are able to nurse or we have to get formula, what is in our water supply, what our mother ate, what hormones she might have taken. And then we get into the things as a child we have really no choice over. If we're sick and we get put on antibiotics, I had ear infections repeatedly as a child and antibiotics very early on. So by the time I got into college, I had a real gut problem going on, and that led to an immune problem. And that is what got me interested in nutrition. What's in the environment, what's in our food, we try to avoid it. But even those of us who are choosing organic and non-GMO project verified foods, we still have higher glyphosate levels and atrazine levels in our urine and in our blood than we should. And it's all higher than in Europe, by an order of magnitude higher. Excessive alcohol consumption, how that messes with the microbiome is that distilled liquor is pretty much like rubbing alcohol to the microorganisms in your gut. So if you're not eating and you're putting down distilled liquor, or worse, really, I love me a good martini, or, you know, fruity drink up like a martini. I mean, I love it. Vodka and tonic, gin and tonic is all great, but you put the microorganism killing distilled liquor along with the sugar, and you do it without eating, and you do it regularly, you're creating a recipe for death of the microbiome. Every time, even if we drink hot tea, we kill some microbes. Okay, so it does happen. And so I joke around with people. I'm like, make sure you take your probiotic after you've finished consuming your distilled alcohol. It's really not the same with wine and beer. They're much lower alcohol. Wine can only be 15% max alcohol, because at that point the yeast dies. And so no more alcohol is made. So that's as high as it gets. And so that's really the limit for your microbiome. If you drink wine with food, it buffers it. And so it's more of a digestive aid and not really killing the microbiome. So it's not across the board that alcohol messes with your gut. But if you are someone who drinks on an empty stomach, that's a recipe for microbial desertification, basically. Even if you did everything right and had the perfect diet and all the fermented foods and all the antioxidants, but you were stressed all the time, you would wreck your gut and your microbiome. So stress is the constant creeper. It's always there, and it creates several things. The high cortisol has an effect. It also mobilizes a lot of sugar in the bloodstream, and that changes what we choose to eat. But the other thing that stress does is get the body to over-release anandamide, which is an endocannabinoid. And when there's too much of it, it binds in the gut to your CB1 receptors and actually pries your gut cells apart, and you get leaky gut. So this is how stress contributes to leaky gut, is actually via the endocannabinoid system. And this is why when you are employing phytocannabinoids, you want to find the right spectrum to reverse that process. And that's where CBD can be helpful. And then certain probiotic strains are very helpful in restoring the integrity of those tight junctions in the gut lining. Most people in North America consume less than 15 grams of fiber a day. Really, I think 25 is the RDA here. I'm not sure what it is in Canada. 35 grams is really what's necessary for good gastrointestinal and immune health. And hunter-gatherer societies routinely consume over 100 grams of fiber. So we will look at that a little bit. All right, some things that can help you with your gut and your immune system at the same time, which the gut is the immune system. It's 2/3 of it. And then there's that part of making white blood cells and having them function properly, and cells that clean up all the garbage and get stuff out, right? So this product, Restore Immune, is meant to be a 2-week product. It's meant to be a heavy hitter, 14-day program with high CFU counts to really repopulate the gut with beneficial microorganisms, crowd out the bad ones, literally a coup on the microbiome to create an entirely different governing body, is the way that I like to think of it. But this has some very special strains in it as well. And so to talk about them a little bit, you have the Bifidobacterium lactis, which is taking up a huge amount of the CFU count, right? And remember, over here, we're looking at 1 capsule, but the actual dose is 2. So this takes up the bulk of the product, but Bifidobacterium lactis 818 is like the stage crew for any great performer. So, you know, Celine Dion, Shakira, J-Lo, like they are nothing without their stage crew. If they are on tour, I mean, a lot of us would love to listen to Lady Gaga at a piano in a bar. I mean, that would be great, right? But if there's really a big performance going on, you need the stage crew. And that's what BL818 does. It sets the stage and the right environment for everything else that's specialty to work even better than it does on its own. And so some superstars I see here, this Bifidobacterium longum is known to be immune supportive. Lactobacillus paracasei 37, huge for the immune system when under stress. Lactobacillus acidophilus 14, classic acidophilus, also very good colonizer vaginally. Plantarum 115, even used prior to vaccinations to make the vaccination cause an immune response that is more natural and native, as opposed to one that is not as long lasting, which is typical of vaccinations. NCFM acidophilus from North Carolina University, most clinically researched acidophilus ever, the most publications on that, very anti-infective. Rhamnosus GG, incredible research on this one for anything from traveler's diarrhea to prevention of neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism or ADHD, onto taking it during pregnancy, immune support, and Rhamnosus species are huge for helping to inform the immune system. In other words, teaching the immune system what is self and what is not self. KCIs and para-KCIs are amazing for the immune system and the hormones and processing stress hormones. And then we will talk about this, this heat-killed Lactobacillus 137. We're going to talk about that one in a moment. This product also has a soil-based organism, Bacillus subtilis, strain identifier DE111. Soil-based organisms are the first thing that humans would ever have gotten, and the thing that humans would have consumed the longest, because every time you take an animal, every time you pick up a nut or a fruit, every time you pull a tuber out of the ground, you're interacting with soil microorganisms, and they pass through you, they're transient, but they do a job while they're there. And they do the same job for your gut that they do for the plants in the soil. So if I go out and put minerals on my 25 acres because I did a soil test and I'm deficient in certain minerals, and I go throw them out there, they're just going to sit there and nothing's going to happen to them until there's microbial activity with these kinds of soil-based organisms in the soil to break them down and integrate them and make them available for the plant to take up. And so at your gut lining, Bacillus subtilis does the same thing. It makes your nutrition more available for absorption across the lining and then utilization. And it also helps to restore tight junctions, those cell boundaries, keeping your cells together. The other great thing about this is you have 400 IUs of D3 per capsule, so 800 total, and you have a zinc brown rice chelate. So let's look at these. We're going to look at these studies on this heat-killed bacteria too in a moment. But if you're not trying to restore and override your microbiome, you don't need that high of a CFU count, but you need a daily immune support. This also has the zinc and the D3 and the heat-killed probiotic, which we'll talk about why that's so special. And it's a 40 billion. So this is a 1 capsule daily, which is great. And it's a good long-term support. When you would do restore is when you've been sick, when you've done a cleanse, when you've had an antibiotic. Anytime that your gut microbiome has been decimated, you've gone on a drinking binge and had a lot of tequila with no food, it's a great time to take Restore. So let's look at this immuno-LP20, which is called a heat-killed, or that's another word, is tyndallized bacteria. Wait, I thought we weren't supposed to kill our probiotics. I thought they were supposed to be alive. I thought that was the big deal about probiotics, is which ones make it through the gastrointestinal tract alive and which ones are killed by your stomach acid and your bile salts and other things. What's killed when you cook your food versus what you get when it's raw. This is all very confusing. In science, we've known for a long time that a lot of microorganisms still have a functional activity, even if they are not active and alive. They have a cellular membrane and proteins in that membrane that activate a particular immune response. So, you know, Germans, they make all this sauerkraut and it's got all this great microorganisms in it, but then they go and fry it up with some sausage in it, which is delicious. Is that negating the health benefits? No, not entirely. It really isn't. And in fact, if you were really sensitive to what the sauerkraut was, if it was raw, sauteing it makes it a little bit more digestible for you. What those microorganisms have done is made that cabbage very digestible, made certain nutrients available. And even if you saute it, their cell membrane proteins are intact and they still have an effect, and there's still information. They're still giving information to your gut lining, which is your immune system. So it's fascinating that there is now research on this concept. These are, of course, essentially flash pasteurized. You know, they're quickly heated. The bacteria is no longer active. It can no longer reproduce or colonize, but it has membrane proteins that have a beneficial immune effect in a number of different situations. So getting a cold when you're stressed out, right? Or raising interferon 1 to protect your body from illness, modulating the immune system, meaning helping the immune system know what is self and non-self so that you don't have a food allergy, right? Prevention of infections like the flu, right? Production of the immune regulating molecules, making antibodies, making memory cells, making killer cells, reduction of upper respiratory tract infections. And then I find these studies very interesting, where you are helping the body to take vaccinations and see them as though you actually got sick and develop that long-lasting immunity, not the short immunity that most people get from vaccinations, right? So there are a lot of different strains that are being studied for that. And then in every probiotic that Garden of Life makes, we want to have food for the microorganism as well, so that when that capsule dissolves and this powder is released and it's getting moistened in the gut and spreading out, that it doesn't have to worry about finding food. It can immediately eat some potato starch and also some acacia fiber, which you'll see in a moment. And it can start to produce the things like short chain fatty acids and other metabolites that it needs to survive and function optimally. So if you were just to take a tablespoon of potato starch a day, it will do all of these things for you. But it is through the signaling by the microorganisms when they are consuming this that happens. The same is true for oatmeal. Oatmeal doesn't just have fiber that mops up your cholesterol. It has fibers that are consumed by certain microorganisms in your gut that then have a different effect on your overall clotting mechanisms and metabolisms and the recycling of cholesterol from your gut, such that your liver can make fresh cholesterol instead of pumping oxidized cholesterol through the bloodstream. So it's never just the food, it's how the food is converted by the microbiome. And the same is true for acacia fiber, different fermentation, different microorganisms, different metabolites. So we get to cover two bases with these two types of prebiotics, which are what your probiotics consume in order to produce beneficial postbiotics for your health. Other things to do if you are trying to support your immune system is make sure that you have all the nutrients that you need. Garden of Life offers both the Vitamin Code and My Kind Organics for multivitamins. Vitamin Code is vegetarian, My Kind is vegan. Both are plant-based for the most part, but Vitamin Code, every nutrient goes through a microorganism, not everyone, but most of the nutrients go through a microorganism and become almost animal-like in that microorganism. And then there are fruits and vegetables and probiotics enzymes added. Some of the nutrients are brown rice protein chelated. My Kind, almost all of the nutrients are coming from an extraction that is just like a botanical extraction of an herb, but it is standardized to the vitamin or the mineral as opposed to being standardized to a typical herbal constituent. So Vitamin Code comes in a capsule, whereas My Kind comes in a tablet. The capsules can be opened. It's easy to take. You can mix it with other things. You can even put it in your oatmeal if the oatmeal's not too hot. Vitamin Code is considered raw because it's never heated above 115 degrees. Neither product has fillers or preservatives or binders or anything like that. So in both cases, you're getting a very clean product. One's a tablet, one's a capsule. One comes straight from the botanicals, the other goes through microorganisms or is bound to brown rice protein. Okay, so zinc we know is very important for immune function. It really actually helps the white blood cell to do what it is supposed to do. And so you want it in the cell. Yes, if you're having skin problems, if you're having low energy, if you're not able to repair the body, the gut lining, repair joints, tendons, you need more zinc. But where it's really been in the press lately has been for immune function, right? And so the Vitamin Code raw zinc And this is also the one that would be in the all-in-one protein powder, and the one that is in the Restore products and the immune probiotic as well, because this zinc is bound to brown rice protein. So you see zinc bisglycinate, that's 2 glycine molecules on a zinc. You see zinc picolinate, that's picolinic acid. What's different about this zinc is that it's bound to brown rice protein, which has 18 different amino acids. So the zinc was designed by Garden of Life initially to be just like a zinc that might come from a shellfish or an organ meat, which is bound to protein and the amino acids in that protein, but it's vegan because it's bound to brown rice instead of coming from an animal. It also has the vitamin C support, spirulina, chlorella, and peat extract to give all of these trace minerals, including copper, which a lot of people are worried about when they're taking zinc. So trace copper, there are some probiotics in it, and also a whole enzyme blend. So there's really not another zinc out there like it, 15 milligrams per capsule. Now we're going to talk about a couple of things from the MyKind line that are supportive, vitamin C and vitamin D. And as I said with MyKind, everything is coming from these botanicals that have been hot water extracted. And if we need D3, it's coming from lichen. The iodine is coming from sea kelp. The K2 comes from natto. And then there's all of this supportive fruit and vegetable product that comes from North America and is utilized as extra cofactors for the lead nutrient. And what you can get from MyKind Organic is at a glance, everything's vegan, gluten-free, and certified organic and non-GMO project verified, which is phenomenal. So this is the vitamin C spray. It's not the highest dose of vitamin C that you can find, but what I love about it is that it is a real dose. It's what you would get in a vitamin C rich food. And it is in a vitamin C rich food form because it's from organic amla. So each spray gives you 12 milligrams. The advice is 5 sprays at a time, which is the vitamin C equivalent of an orange, but has the cofactors that you would only get if you ate the whole orange and didn't peel it and peel all the white stuff off or juice it. So if you were to take a handful of amla berries from an amla tree because you were in Sri Lanka or India and eat them, this is what it is like. It is not just ascorbic acid. It's not ascorbic acid plus bioflavonoids. It is actually everything that came from that amla fruit and has been extracted botanically to be 50% vitamin C and 50% other cofactors that are available in the amla berry. And then this is our only form of D3 that's actually vegan. Most D3 is cholecalciferol that comes from sheep's wool first, and then is irradiated in UV light to become cholecalciferol, which is the form that you take in, and then your body makes 25 hydroxy vitamin D3. This spray is from lichen. So lichen has been known to contain D3, not D2, D3 since like the 70s. That's where the reindeer get it, and people who eat and live with reindeer, that's where they get it. And so there have been interesting studies on it, but how to get it without scraping lichen off of a bunch of rocks and imagine wildcrafting lichen. I think if you live in northern Canada, you can imagine that. Or growing it in a tank. And that's what's done now, is how do you cultivate lichen and be able to use that as a plant-derived source of vitamin D3, which mushrooms really are not a source of vitamin D3. They're a good source of vitamin D2. In with this is cranberry and pumpkin seed oil. The same cranberry and pumpkin seed we press for oil, we use in proteins. So it has a dual use. And it provides certain essential fatty acids that are very beneficial. All right, so now Atrium Innovations has provided you with a couple case studies. So let's take a look at maybe a customer that could be you or somebody that you know. And what is their concern for their health and what are they willing to do for their health? Alexa must be busy. She's working a lot. She's got a lot of new things to keep track of. Her job and her social life and her family life maybe has her pretty stressed out. And when everybody starts to get sick, she really gets hit hard. She's on a new job. She's on a budget. She can't remember to take a whole bunch of different things. She just wants one thing, and she wants to just start there. So we want a daily product for her. We want something that's going to give her the zinc that she needs, the vitamin D3 that she needs, and support her gut issues, her stress issues. So we come back in here and we see Lactobacillus paracasei 37, which is very good for stress-induced gut issues. HN001, helping with gut lining and tightening up those tight junctions and preventing food allergies, rhamnosus GG as well. And then that heat-killed bacteria that helps to prevent flus and upper respiratory tract infections. So a perfect daily for her. Start there. If she feels better, if she's feeling like that's helping, she can come back for some vitamin C spray because there's no vitamin C in here. That would be easy, right? Let's talk about Grace. It goes straight to her chest in the winter. She has IBS. What does that mean? She has a range of digestive issues that are not identifiable by her doctor as being anything that can be treated with medication. And so it's IBS. It's just irritable bowel. And so many things might bother her. Many foods might bother her. But she likes to take whatever it takes to keep her healthy and keep her health on track. Okay? She doesn't like to swallow capsules, but we're going to get her on these two a day for 14 days to start. Then we might move her to a daily, right? And she's going to get all the stuff we talked about, the D3, the zinc, and the heat-killed probiotic, all the good strains, and then the extra bifidobacterium that is going to really rebuild her gut and help her overcome this irritability at the lining of her gut. We also want her to have a protein powder because protein helps with the immune system, protein helps with blood sugar balance, protein helps with repair, with muscle mass. 56, we are worried about muscle mass. It's very hard to maintain muscle mass without adequate protein, and you have to move too. But moving alone won't do it, and protein powder alone won't do it. The two have to go together. So getting her a meal replacement or a meal enhancement, a glass of this, 1 scoop plus a very good salad or soup, right? Maybe that would be what she'd have for lunch, or maybe 2 scoops of this for breakfast if she's running out the door. And then if she's willing, she can just do the D3 and the vitamin C sprays, right? Because she's vegetarian. She prefers to have a plant-based diet. These are vegan and they're quick and easy and she can take as needed. In other words, every single spray of this gives you 1,000 IUs of vitamin D3, and there are 125 sprays in the bottle. So if you're feeling particularly tapped, you can take more or less, and the same is true with the vitamin C. Get your vitamin C equivalent of a whole vitamin C rich fruit with 5 sprays, and then if you need to do that several times a day, there's not a problem because none of the sugar is in there. There's never sugar left. It's always been filtered out of the extract. I love this. Take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live. I'm often amazed that we don't do more for our bodies, that we don't realize we're not just spirit, we're not just mind, that this is our car. And it's a lot like a car, right? There are people who are polishing their car, vacuuming, polishing it into Q-tips. And then there are people who just, it's like their mobile trash can, right? So I think it's the same with our bodies. And I've always had a health vanity. I really want to be healthy, look healthy, feel healthy. I used to love desserts. I like it sometimes now. I love wine, but if the wine isn't making me feel good, I don't want to have it because I want to feel well the next day, right? Also, your mind lives in the body, and the mind doesn't function nearly as well when the body is not healthy. Your emotions and your spirit live in the body, and they are not as balanced nor as accessible if the body is not healthy. So do the best you can with your body. Do treat it like a temple, and everything that it houses will have the greater opportunity to express its highest possibility. So
That actually shouldn't be there. My apologies, everyone. That's
skipping,
for our retailers. Sorry.
never mind. I'm skipping ahead. Great. And this is the Instagram handle for Garden of Life Canada. Actually, Garden of Life Canada is great on Instagram. They do an amazing job. They keep it really wholesome. So I encourage you to go check that out. And do we have any time for questions, Wendy?
We do have some time for some questions. Just one question that I accidentally removed. Someone had asked about the Canadian vitamin D levels. From, if memory serves, it is 2,500 international units is what Health Canada has as the RDA now for vitamin D.
Which is going to be about 50, 70,
sorry.
50, about 60 some micrograms, right?
Yes, I believe that's what it is in micrograms.
Yeah.
So some of the questions that had come up during your presentation, I'll just compile together. One of the first was that they had heard that you can only digest up to about 28 grams of protein per meal. Any more than that is hard on the heart and the kidneys. Can you comment?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So what that means is that is really a caveat for the exerciser, athlete, bodybuilder who wants to chug 90 grams of protein post-workout. There's no point in that, because the post-workout is really for that hour post-workout. And in an hour or one digestive round, you can really only process, like you said, 25 to 28 grams of protein in that period of time. The rest is waiting and on hold. But that doesn't mean that you won't eventually get to it. So when we consume more than that in a sitting, so the raw fit is 28 grams. If you did 2 scoops of the all-in-one shake, it would be 40 grams of protein. That's more typical of a meal. I wouldn't say that it's hard on the heart. What's difficult is when you're taking just pure isolated amino acid protein drinks in really high doses, and the body can't deal with it, and it has to break it down through the kidneys and eliminate. That's very hard on the body. So when you're taking a completely broken down free-form amino acid drink or synthetic drink, that is what's very difficult. Over-consuming protein at a meal typically just means that it's going to sit in your stomach longer, and it's going to be a little bit heavier, and it's going to take, excuse me, longer to digest. But getting 40 grams of protein in a meal is not unusual. But for people who have low stomach acid, where stomach acid is the first, your stomach is the first place protein is getting broken down. And the next place is with the proteases in the small intestine. And if the stomach doesn't do its job, the proteases cannot compensate for that. So if you know that you have low hydrochloric acid output, it is really much more advisable to keep within that 20-gram range per consumption of protein, and or utilize a betaine HCl enzyme supplement. So, you know, this is one of those things like, yes, you're correct, but the context is very important to remember. People who have digestive issues should definitely do less at a time in order to utilize more of it. But over 3 hours, if you're not grazing, if you eat a meal and you give 3 or 4 hours between, you'll eventually break down and digest most of what you consumed, even if it was in the 50, 60 gram range.
You mentioned free-form amino acid supplements. Are that something that is advisable or something that would be discouraged as an addition to a protein?
So it really depends upon what your goals are. You know, a lot of people who are bodybuilding, trying to attain certain athletic capacity, utilize those free-form aminos, which what that means for those of you that don't know is it's not, those amino acids are not linked to form a protein or even a peptide. They are all individual. They absorb very quickly. You would not want to sit at a desk and consume a free-form amino acid drink for your protein, because what you'll get is quick absorption of single amino acids into your bloodstream, and those that are not used immediately will be turned to sugar. And so, oddly enough, you can actually raise your blood sugar by doing that. If you're working out, it's different because you either are working out and using that, or you're in the repair phase. So a lot of people use free-form aminos pre or post-workout, and they have a certain goal. The average person does not need that unless they have a need for a particular high glutamine because you're trying to do gut repair and you take that with your protein powder. High glycine because you're trying to do joint repair or sleep better. You know, high lysine because you have a tendency to get like cold sores or something like that, and you want to up your lysine. So those are times when people add free forms to their diet. Other times are really just with sports nutrition.
I am working to try and keep the questions to most related to the topics covered this evening. So the next question that has come up is the best time to take probiotics, predominantly with gut healing in mind. Would that be with food, before food, following the meal?
When you will remember. Wendy knows this. I say this every time. The best time to take your probiotic is when you remember. But if you were really saying, I'll take it when you say, Amber, I love a probiotic before bed because you've eaten, but it might have been a couple hours and you're not eating anymore and you're not stressing, you're sleeping and you're repairing and you're digesting and detoxifying. And that probiotic is participating in that process. It also can help with better bowel movements in the morning a lot of times. So that's my favorite time of day. Aside from that, my favorite time of day is first thing in the morning before you leave. Does it need to be with a food? The neat thing about Garden of Life probiotics is almost all of them you can take either with or without food. There are a couple exceptions sometimes, but they are none of the ones that are pictured here. And so I come back around to when you remember, but right before bed is my favorite time.
A clarification question on the Restore 200 billion and whether or not it is useful to proactively start taking before you finish taking the antibiotics in the last few days.
That's a great question. So you'll have doctors who tell you don't bother to take a probiotic while you're on the antibiotic. You'll just kill it. That is just not true. You'll see on the boxes they say take it 2 or 3 hours separate from the antibiotic. It's especially important if you take it before your antibiotic. So in other words, if you take a probiotic with breakfast and you're going to take the antibiotic with lunch, make sure there's 2 to 3 hours difference there. If you took your antibiotic in the morning, you can wait a little less time for the probiotic because most antibiotics are going in your bloodstream very quickly. If it's one for your gut, then definitely give that space. It is possible to come out of a round of antibiotics with a healthier microbiome than you went in. If you really hit it hard and you do something like these Restore products while you are on the antibiotic, you have a chance of really overcoming this gradual knocking down of the diversity of your microbiome. I've experienced it myself. It's a great, I just would never wait until you're done with your round of antibiotics to start something like this. So many people might do 2 bottles of this. They might do one during their antibiotic and then do another round as they're wrapping it up and to continue to repopulate the gut.
Thank you so much for answering the questions on probiotics. Moving back to the proteins, I believe the individual was going for the FODMAP and they typed PODMAP.
Yeah.
Is that acceptable or is that tolerable with the all-in-one shake?
I think it's really, each person is different and you're going to find things in here that are that are excluded on the low FODMAPs diet, and not the least of which is the fiber. That doesn't mean it's bad for you. It just means that at this moment, you may not be able to utilize it. I would use the all-in-one shake as a transition food back to the foods that contain things that you need, but that you have eliminated on the low FODMAPs. So the problem here is you're going to have legumes and you're going to have sources of fiber that are often excluded on low FODMAPs. Now, you can, and you have to watch even some probiotics and some prebiotic fibers as well. So the difficulty with GAPS diet, gut and psychology syndrome, or the low FODMAPs diet, FODMAPs is an acronym which basically is talking about different starch and carbohydrate chains that we don't digest, but our microbiome does. And that person's microbiome has organisms in the wrong place, and they are fermenting everything they eat. So things that would normally be beneficial to you, like fermented foods and fibers and beans and starchy things, create gastrointestinal havoc. And so for a time, those foods have to be eliminated. And this is not a low FODMAPs compliant food, but it would be good food for transition back, because especially you could do not a full scoop, but do partial scoops and gradually increase it.
Is there any value in taking a digestive enzyme before a meal high in protein?
There is, but a digestive enzyme, if you need to take it, you have a gastrointestinal problem that you need to address. It's like a Band-Aid, right? You still have to heal. So if you find that high protein or high fat meals make you feel heavy, sluggish, tired, bloated, you're a good candidate for a digestive enzyme. And the ones that you take before a high protein containing meal are the betaine HCl, which increases the hydrochloric acid in the stomach so that you break down that protein and pre-digest the fat better. After that, then there are enzymes that are actually protein digesting enzymes, carb digesting enzymes, fat digesting enzymes, and you can take them with or at the end of the meal. So a lot of people, if you have difficulty digesting protein containing meals, but you want to continue to eat those meals, a good place to start is just with the betaine HCl, and then gradually working into the proteases. Again, though, these kinds of shakes are going to be your most easily digestible sources of protein, not only because of the form of the plant protein, which is soaked and sprouted, grains, seeds, and legumes, but also because there are digestive enzymes in it already.
We'll take just a couple more questions. One thing I did want to mention is Healthy Planet does have an amazing catalog of previous webinars on their YouTube channel. And Amber did a dedicated protein webinar in July, which many of you may be interested in going and looking at the recording for more information just dedicated to the protein topic itself. Next question is, and you sort of covered this a little bit earlier, but is there a way to sort of put a basic formula of the amount of protein an individual should be taking in each day, maybe based on their weight?
Yes, there is actually a calculation for that. And I feel like it was 0.8 grams per pound. Does that make sense? Or was it per kilogram? No, it must be per pound. If I remember right. And that's an easy thing to look up, is the WHO's recommendations for protein intake. But again, it's a calculation, and each person is different, and what their ability to digest is different. You can kind of gauge if the calculation is saying 150-pound female, a minimum of 85 grams, and you're 140, you might be looking at 70 grams, 75 grams. So you can kind of guesstimate.
And the last question we'll take this evening is, if you're allergic to raw fruits and vegetables, oral allergy syndrome, will the raw product line be okay, for you to use, Or is the processing temperature too low to denature the problem proteins?
Yeah. I can't tell you. I mean, I wish I could. This is going to have you do well with this, the raw organic protein. The all-in-one shake will have this fruit and vegetable and grass juice powder blend that may bother you. And then, getting into the raw nutrients like the zinc, this also has a fruit and vegetable blend, and everyone varies. Some of them are 25 milligrams, some of them are 560 milligrams. So you kind of have to look at the total amount. And so here's a great example of somebody who at this moment cannot eat the real food. And this happens. And this is why there is the need to have supplements that aren't from food, but that are made in a laboratory and do not have those food allergens in them, because we've just gotten to this crazy point where some people can't eat real food right now. The low FODMAPs diet, same thing. A lot of the foods that are excluded from that diet are foods that are good for you and you want to get back to eventually, but right now you can't. And the rule of improving and healing gut problems, the first number one of the 4 R's is remove what bothers you. So, Vitamin Code and MyKind both may not be the right first choice for somebody who can't do a lot of fruits and vegetables for that reason. These probiotics might not be the right choice for somebody who has to be on a low FODMAPs diet, but they are the things you want to come back to in the same way that you want to come back to the foods that are good for you, that you want to be able to rotate in your diet. It's your goal to get back to that and to get there. So, it's great that we have both. My nutritional advice has always been supplement it like you eat it. But if you're allergic to the food, don't supplement with that food. It's just going to be more of the same thing, right? Find an alternative for now that is free of that food. Heal the problem, heal the whole gut lining. Oral allergy syndrome means that the gut lining is inflamed by that food because the immune system is confused. So you have to heal the gut, heal the immune system, and then be able to reintroduce those foods.
Just a couple more questions, Amber, just regarding proteins as well as milk. First one with proteins, is there any value in the ideology of carb loading prior to a workout?
I did not say that I was a certified sports nutritionist. Get me out of my scope of practice. So it depends on what you're doing, I think. And it's about endurance. And so even if it's a 400-meter sprint or relay, you may need that carb loading to get all the way through that sprint. Marathoning, Ironmanning, carb loading is super important. I don't know if it's important for shot put, but carbs have gotten a really bad rap. And it's really more about what carbs is it, than carbs as themselves being a macronutrient that we should avoid. My Chinese doctor, when I would go for acupuncture, and I'm a big fat coffee in the morning drinker, some of you know, like my coffee has all of the calories in it from fat. It's coconut MCTs, it's butter, it's cream, and I'm like got 400 calories of fat because I want to start my day with fat. Well, this drove him crazy. What have you had to eat today? Fat and coffee. He's like, eat a biscotti. I'm like, I don't want a biscotti. He's like, eat a biscotti or my acupuncture won't help you. And I'm like, I don't understand that. Different concept. And so carbohydrates play a very particular role in our body, and that kind of science can become very complex and very specific to you as an individual. If you had candida, but you were an athlete, I would never carb load you because I'm going to give you gastrointestinal problems, right? So we'd have to find a different way to do that. If you have IBS, I'm not going to carb load you with sugar. I'd carb load you with squash and sweet potatoes, right? So, what that means is different for every single person. If you're just going to the gym to do weightlifting, what's important is that you are calorically sufficient and that you have enough available complete protein grams in the hour of your workout or after your workout to replace and repair those muscle fibers. If you don't, and you get it later, it will only go where it's needed at the moment. It won't go to the muscle fibers you worked out. So if you did quads today and glutes and hamstrings, and you want to have stronger, toner, more appealing quads and glutes and hamstrings, next time you go to the gym, you better get that protein during and within an hour after that workout. Because if you sit down to the computer, you'll just develop your finger muscles.
And the last question I will be combining into two. One of the last products you showed, I believe it was a Restore Immune with zinc, mentions that it contains milk. The individual wanted to know how much milk would there be in each serving? And can you clarify if the other products in the doctor formulated probiotic line contain dairy as well?
Okay, so even as recently as 7 years ago, 5 years ago, there was no regulation on labeling. Well, this is true for the US. I don't know when this happened for Canada, but there was no regulation on labeling what the bacteria grew in, or the yeast grew in, or the bacteria or yeast that made an enzyme grew in. So the food that they ate to become what they are did not have to be declared. And it is proprietary. So you can't exactly just come out and say this was the growth medium. But you also cannot any longer say that it's dairy-free or soy-free or gluten-free if the growth medium contained those foods. It's no longer in the product. It was filtered off the growth medium. However, as an allergen, it has to be declared, okay? So we have also at Garden of Life in the US, we have a raw probiotics line that is entirely yogurt and kefir strains. And so it is grown in dairy, but it has no dairy in it. But if you were absolutely dairy allergic, I would avoid it. If you're lactose intolerant, it's not going to bother you because all the lactose would have been consumed by the microorganisms. So many enzymes, digestive enzymes today they don't say free of dairy, or they might say contains dairy, because an organism might have been grown in dairy to produce a dairy digesting enzyme. And so this is just something you need to know about labeling laws. There is no dairy added to it. The dairy that it grew on is no longer there, but it was in it and in the process of making it, and therefore has to be declared by current labeling laws.
And is just with milk in general, is the casein in milk bad for people?
I mean, I think that okay, let's just take the Maasai in Africa who drink copious amounts of dairy from their own cattle. And it contains casein, but it doesn't bother them. It doesn't cause any problems, right? But you take people who take a weightlifting, meathead store protein powder with amped up casein to give really high protein, and they start to get some really weird psychological symptoms. I don't know if you've heard of any of these cases. So in excess, anything can be damaging. If you were dairy tolerant and you had a glass of milk a day or some cheeses and they have casein in them, that might not bother you. But if you're isolating casein and adding it to supplements, it might really bother you. And then there's people in between. So there is no, is it bad for you or good for you? It's in certain things, but if you don't digest it, it becomes a toxin. And so the gluten-free, casein-free diet for kids on the autism spectrum, but also for people who have allergies, asthma, ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, try this casein-free diet, because if your gut lining, the enzymes down in here can't break down the casein, they get it partly broken down, and it then has a different structure, and it can bind with different receptors, and that can cause serious neurological and psychological issues, and that's been pretty well demonstrated. So it's not that it's bad, but if you aren't digesting it, it becomes a toxin. And we say that in Ayurvedic medicine, whatever you do not digest becomes a toxin to your body and gets stored as ama somewhere in your tissues. Ama means toxin, and has to be eliminated. And if you don't eliminate regularly, then you have to pay thousands of dollars to have panchakarma. And that's what we say in Ayurveda.
Thank you so much, Amber.
Wendy and I would love to pay thousands of dollars to have panchakarma in Kerala for 14 days. This is what we want to do.
Yes, it would be amazing. Thank you, Amber, so much for your presentation this evening. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us for almost the last hour and a half to learn about Garden of Life products and how they can support gut health and the immune system. If you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me at at webinar@gardenoflifecanada.com. Again, that is webinar@gardenoflifecanada.com. Again, Amber, thank you so much for sharing this information. And everyone else, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you all.
Thanks, Amber.